I'm Karen, 65 today. I'm sitting alone in this little rented apartment, staring at a cake I bought myself from the grocery store. The candles melted into a puddle hours ago because I lit them anyway, hoping maybe someone would show up or at least call. But the phone stayed silent and no one knocked. Not even my son. Especially not my son. It's strange how quiet can feel louder than anything else. Every tick of the clock on the wall feels like it's mocking me, reminding me of every choice I made that brought me here. I used to tell myself I did what I had to do, that I deserved to chase my own happiness. But tonight, sitting here with nothing but my thoughts and this cold cake, I can finally say it out loud. I was selfish. I thought love was enough of a reason to leave. I thought my son was young, that he would understand one day, that he would forgive me. I told myself over and over that a woman deserves to follow her heart. I chose a man over my child because I thought it made me brave. Now I see it didn't make me brave at all. It just made me blind. I traded a quiet, steady love for something I thought was more exciting, more real. And in the process, I left my little boy standing on the porch, crying for a mother who didn't even look back. I tell myself sometimes that I was young, that I didn't know better. But that's a lie. Deep down, I knew. I knew the moment I packed my suitcase and he grabbed my hand, begging me to stay. I felt it then. And I feel it now, sitting here alone on my birthday, realizing he hasn't spoken to me in almost 20 years. This is my story. And if you're still here listening, you deserve to hear it all. Because maybe someone out there can still make a different choice. Maybe someone out there can keep from making the same mistake I did. I used to think I was meant for something bigger than what I had. Back then, I was in my 30s, married to a man named David and raising a little boy who clung to me like I was his whole world. David was kind, but quiet. He worked hard, paid the bills, never raised his voice, never demanded much of me. And for a while, that was enough. But after a few years, I started to feel trapped. There were mornings I'd stand at the kitchen window, washing dishes while my son played in the yard, and I'd catch myself dreaming of a different life. A life where I wasn't stuck in this little house in the suburbs folding laundry and cooking dinner. A life where someone looked at me like I was more than just a wife or a mother. I wanted to feel alive. I wanted to feel chosen. I thought I deserved more. That's how women in the movies always said it. You deserve to be happy. You deserve passion. And when I met Paul, it was like stepping into one of those movies. He was tall, confident, with expensive shoes and a laugh that filled the room. He owned his own company, drove a sleek black car, and knew all the right words to make me feel like I'd been invisible until the moment he saw me. It started small. Coffee after work. Long lunches where I lost track of time. Texts that made my heart race late at night. He'd tell me how beautiful I was, how much potential I had, how I'd been wasted on a man who didn't see my worth. And I believed him. Every single word. The more I was with Paul, the more I resented David. His quiet felt like weakness. His steadiness felt like a cage. Even my son started to feel like a chain around my ankle, pulling me back every time I tried to run forward. I hated myself for thinking it, but I couldn't stop. I started imagining a life without them. A life where I was free to be the woman Paul told me I could be. When I finally told David I was leaving, he didn't even fight. He just stood there holding our son close to his chest and nodded like he'd been expecting it. I remember my little boy's face that day, how his eyes welled up and his bottom lip quivered as he begged me not to go. I told him I'd always love him, that he'd understand someday. And then I walked out. I convinced myself over and over that I was doing the right thing. That kids were resilient. That he'd grow up and realize his mother deserved to be happy too. I pictured myself coming back for him someday once my life was settled, and he'd see that I'd done it all to become a better person. But even as I told myself those stories, something inside me knew they weren't true. There was a part of me quiet and buried that whispered maybe I'd made the wrong choice. But I ignored it, because it was easier to believe I'd done what I had to do than to face what I'd really done. That was who I was before everything fell apart. A woman so desperate to feel alive again that she forgot what it meant to truly love the people who already did. A woman who thought she was chasing happiness when really she was just running away. When I first moved in with Paul, I thought I'd finally made it. His apartment downtown felt like something out of a magazine, all glass and city lights, with a doorman who opened the door and called me ma'am. There were fresh flowers on the counter every week, boxes of chocolates on my pillow, and invitations to parties where everyone wore silk and laughed like they had nothing to worry about. I wore dresses I never could have afforded before, and I'd catch myself in the mirror feeling 10 years younger. He took me to steakhouses where the menus didn't have prices and ordered bottles of wine I couldn't pronounce. There were weekends in the Hamptons and nights when he'd surprise me with tickets to the theater. I'd sit next to him, his hand resting on my knee, and glance around the room, knowing people must be jealous of me. They didn't know I'd left a little boy behind to be here. And whenever that thought crept in, I'd push it down. I told myself my son would forgive me, that he was young enough to bounce back, and that one day he'd see how happy I was and be happy for me too. I even imagined him visiting, staying with me and Paul, seeing how different and glamorous my life had become. I thought he'd look at me and finally understand why I left. Every time the guilt flared up, Paul's voice drowned it out. He'd tell me how much better off I was now, how David was never worthy of me, how I deserved everything coming my way. And I believed him because believing him was easier than admitting what I'd done. I carried myself like a queen in those early months, convinced that I'd finally escaped the small life that had been holding me back. Convinced I'd won. It started so subtly, I almost didn't notice at first. A sharpness in his voice when I disagreed with him at dinner. A hand gripping my arm a little too tight when I laughed at the wrong moment. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself everyone loses their temper now and then. But the moments came more often. One night, I was late coming home because of traffic. When I walked in, his face was dark and quiet in a way that made my stomach turn. He didn't raise his voice at first. He just stared at me and called me careless, ungrateful, selfish. Then, his hand came down hard across my cheek so fast it stunned me. I stood there, frozen tears stinging my eyes, while he muttered that it was my fault for pushing him. After that, it became a pattern. Weeks of calm, then a storm I never saw coming. The first time he shoved me into the bedroom door, I locked myself in for hours, too afraid to breathe. He came back later with flowers and apologies, promising it wouldn't happen again, and I wanted to believe him so badly that I did. But the fear stayed. Every sound in the apartment made me jump. Every night felt like walking on glass, trying not to set him off. There were mornings I woke up and didn't recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. I'd run my fingers over the bruises, pull my hair over the marks, and tell myself I was strong enough to handle it. In those quiet moments alone in the bedroom with the door locked, I would think about my son. I'd remember his little hands tugging at my sleeve and his voice calling after me as I walked out the door. And I'd wonder if he would even recognize me now, or if he'd even care. The first birthday after I left was quiet, but I didn't mind. Paul took me out to dinner and bought me a necklace I wore proudly, even though it felt heavy around my neck. I told myself my son was just too young to understand, and that next year would be different. But the next year came and it wasn't. There was no call, no card, no sign that he even remembered me. At first I told myself David was to blame, that he was keeping my son from me out of spite. I clung to that thought because it hurt less than admitting the truth. But each year that passed, the excuses got harder to believe. On my 40th birthday, I sat by the phone for hours, staring at it like it might come to life. It never did. Paul didn't notice. Or maybe he just didn't care. The years blurred together after that. Paul became colder, meaner. The gifts stopped coming. The dinners out became dinners alone while he stayed late at work or disappeared for days. By my 50th, he didn't even say happy birthday. I baked my own cake that year. It sat untouched on the counter while I drank a glass of wine and tried not to cry. I kept hoping for something from my son. Just a note, just one word to let me know he still thought of me. I checked the mailbox every morning like a fool. Nothing ever came. I thought maybe if I sent him something first, he'd respond. But I could never bring myself to do it. I was too ashamed of what I might hear back. On my 55th birthday, Paul left for good. He didn't even pack his things. He just never came back one night. I sat in that apartment for weeks, surrounded by his silence and mine. It was the same silence my son had given me all those years. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe I deserved it. The birthdays after that felt longer somehow. The apartment seemed colder. One year, I found an old box of photographs in the closet and spent the night going through them. There he was, my little boy with his wide brown eyes wearing that striped shirt he loved so much. One picture stopped me cold. It was from the day I left. He was standing on the porch, tears running down his cheeks, his hand reaching out as if he could still catch me. His mouth open crying something I couldn't quite remember now. I stared at that photo until my own tears blurred it into nothing. That image stayed with me long after I put the box away. Every year when my birthday rolled around, I'd see his face in my mind. That little boy who once called me Mom begging me not to go. And I'd sit there in the quiet knowing I had no one to blame but myself. I don't know what finally pushed me to pick up the phone. Maybe it was another birthday, another year sitting alone in that quiet apartment with nothing but my regrets for company. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial the number. I'd kept it all these years written in the back of an old address book, though I'd never dared to use it until now. When I heard the line ringing, my heart pounded in my chest so hard it hurt. I kept rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain how I'd beg him just to listen. But when he finally answered, his voice stopped me cold. It was deep and flat, not at all the soft little boy's voice I remembered. I managed to whisper his name, my voice breaking halfway through. There was silence for a moment, and then he asked who was calling. I said it was me, his mother. My chest felt like it was caving in when he let out a short, sharp laugh that wasn't really a laugh at all. He said he didn't have a mother and hung up. Just like that. I sat there staring at the phone like it might still come back to life. But it didn't. So I called again and again. The calls went straight to voicemail after that. I left messages, my voice cracking, asking him to just give me 5 minutes. I told him I was sorry. I told him I missed him every day. When that didn't work, I started texting. I sent emails too, pouring my heart out in paragraphs that took me hours to write. I sat up late into the night, staring at the screen, waiting for something. Anything. But nothing ever came back. I thought maybe he just needed time. So I waited. I told myself tomorrow he'd call me back. Tomorrow he'd remember that little boy who used to hug my leg and beg me not to leave. But tomorrow never came. A few weeks later, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't keep sitting in that apartment pretending I was strong enough to wait. So I got on a bus and rode across town to the address I'd found online. My hands were cold and sweaty, the whole way, my stomach in knots as I rehearsed what I'd say one last time. When I got there, I stood at the end of his driveway for a long time, too scared to move. The house was small but neat with flowers planted along the walkway. I wondered if he had a family now, if there were kids inside, and my throat tightened at the thought that maybe they didn't even know I existed. Finally, I forced myself to walk up and knock. I heard footsteps on the other side of the door, and then it opened. There he was, my son, a man now taller than I remembered, his face hard and closed. He didn't look surprised to see me. For a moment, I just stared at him, and then I whispered his name. He didn't say mine back. He didn't even flinch. He just asked what I wanted. I tried to explain my words tumbling out faster than I could catch them. I said I was sorry. I said I knew I'd made mistakes. I said I missed him more than anything. He stood there staring at me with a look I couldn't read. And then he shook his head. His voice was calm, almost too calm when he finally spoke. He said I'd already made my choice a long time ago, that he'd learned from me how to walk away. And now it was his turn. Then he closed the door. I stood there for what felt like hours staring at that door, waiting for it to open again. But it didn't. The flowers at my feet blurred through my tears, and all I could hear in my head was his voice telling me what I already knew. That some choices you don't come back from. The days feel longer now. I wake up in this little apartment with its thin walls and faded carpet, and the silence greets me like an old friend. I make my coffee, sit at the table, and stare out the window at a street that never seems to change. Sometimes I wonder if the world even notices I'm still here. I spend a lot of time with my own thoughts. There are nights when I sit in front of the mirror and don't recognize the woman staring back at me. Her eyes look tired. Her hands look older than she feels inside. But she's mine. This is the face of someone who made her choice and now lives with it. I think about him every day. My son. I wonder what kind of man he's become, what his life looks like now. I imagine he has a family of his own, maybe children, who run through his house with laughter and noise. I hope he's happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me. I keep telling myself it's enough just to know he's out there. But the truth is, there are nights when the emptiness feels heavier than I can carry. Nights when I whisper his name into the dark, knowing no one can hear me. I still hope deep down that one day he'll change his mind. That one day I'll hear a knock on the door and see him standing there. But I've learned not to count on hope. Some wounds don't heal just because you want them to. Some words once spoken can't be taken back. And some choices, no matter how much you regret them, stay with you forever. So I take it day by day. I keep going because there's nothing else to do. I sit at this little table in this quiet apartment, sipping my coffee and watching the light change through the blinds. I tell myself, this is what I earned. This is the life I built with my own hands. I still pray for forgiveness, though. Not just from him, but from myself. I don't know if it will ever come. But at least I can say I finally see things clearly. That has to count for something. If you're still listening, there's something I need you to hear. Don't ever put someone else above your own children. No matter how tempting it feels, no matter how convinced you are that you deserve happiness, don't forget the people who already love you most. I thought I was choosing myself when I left. I thought my son would forgive me someday, that he'd grow up and understand. But he didn't. And now I sit here every day with nothing but memories of what I threw away. You think you'll have time to fix it later. You tell yourself there will always be another chance. But one day you wake up and that chance is gone. The silence between you grows too wide to cross, and no amount of regret can fill it. So love your children while you can. Be there for them even when it feels like no one is there for you. Because when you walk away, When you break their trust, you might never be able to earn it back. I've learned the hard way that family isn't just something you're born with. It's something you have to choose every day over and over. If you don't, you might find yourself like me, sitting alone, wishing for a knock at the door that never comes. If you still have a chance to make things right, take it. Don't wait for tomorrow. Tell them you're sorry. Tell them you love them. And never forget what really matters. Because once you lose it, you may never get it back.